So what type of physical activity should we be doing to lose the midsection weight?
Aerobic exercise. And aerobic means with air, which means that it's at an intensity low enough that we can breathe comfortably and supply the oxygen.
Hey guys, thank you so much for being here. A quick message before we dive in. You may be watching the show but haven't taken a moment to click the subscribe button below. So if you've ever gained value from this show, it would mean so much to me if you click the subscribe button right now. And not only will this allow you to see these messages first, all this great content we have, you're gonna get notified first when it comes out. But the bigger our subscriber base grows, the more people we can impact and the bigger the guests we can get on this show as well. So again, thank you so much as always for your support. It means the world to me. Make sure to click the subscribe button below and let's dive into this conversation.
So as soon as you start huffing and puffing, that's not a bad thing for short duration, but if you go and you do a 45-minute spin class every day and you're just huffing and puffing, you're gonna make way too much cortisol.
Really?
Yes.
So you might be hurting your chances of losing the weight
Yes.
if you're doing that intensive a workout every day.
Correct.
If you're doing a HIIT training 2-3 times a week for 45 minutes, is that okay? Or do you feel like that's still intense?
If it's 45 minutes, it's not HIIT.
Gotcha.
Yeah. HIIT, high intensity, means that it's so, to me, my definition.
It's like 10-15 minutes. It's like,
it's not, well, maybe the total duration would be 10-15 minutes. But if you do interval, high intensity interval training is what HIIT is, then the intervals should be so intense you can't even do them for more than 30 seconds. Like they should be so intense, provided you're fit enough to do that, of course. But if you do 30 seconds and then you do 30-second rest and then 30 seconds, you should be able to bring your heart rate up to maximum in maybe 4 or 5 intervals. That is HIIT. Okay, now you're done. Right. You've created your
5 minutes. Yeah.
your positive hormones. Your growth hormone to stimulate fat burning, your growth hormone to stimulate muscle building, to produce and to stimulate new brain synapses, to enhance learning and focus. All the good stuff in the brain depends on hormones. And two of those hormones are human growth hormone and BDNF, which is brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And those two hormones are necessary to make new synapses, right? So your brain is constantly remodeling, and every time you learn something, whether you're 20 years old or 80 years old, you make new synapses. And the synapses you use, they get stronger. The ones that you don't use go away. But these two hormones, which some of the strongest ways to produce them is high intensity exercise and fasting, are pretty much required to build a brain and to learn.
Really? So what type of high intensity exercise are you doing on a weekly basis?
My favorite to really get the heart rate up is I go to my favorite mountain close to where I live, where there's a trail, and it's like four miles around, and I walk a little bit, I jog a little bit, I walk a little bit, jog a little bit, just kind of enjoying the movement. And my heart rate probably stays around 100 to 120, 130 maybe. And then there's some hills, and then I do some sprints up the hills. So now I push it a little bit, and 30-second push, and my heart rate's 160. And then I walk a little, jog a little, there's another hill, and I push it a little bit more, and my heart rate hits 165, 170. And that I might do that in 30 seconds, or it might take a minute to get to that heart rate, and then I'm done.
You do a few hills.
Yes.
What if you did 20 hills?
Then
is that too much? A 10 to 30 second?
That might be okay if you're 20, 25 years old, you're an elite athlete, and that's part of your event. But if you're 45, 50, 60, and you just try to stay as healthy as possible, I think that's too much.
Really?
And in any event, it's unnecessary because it's not about the quantity. Quantity is good for fitness, but not necessarily for health.
Interesting. So you only need a few sprints every couple. Is this every day or every few days?
I would say it's no more than twice a week.
Twice a week
for the average person now. And we have to, if you're watching this, you have to understand if you're in the elite athlete category or in the 50-year-old trying to stave off
just living life,
degenerative disease.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if you're more of a, if you're an athlete, even in your 40s and 50s, you could push it a little farther. If you're competing in stuff or doing triathlons or marathons or just wanting to stay lean, it's important to be doing that a little bit more.
Yeah. So there's no doubt. I mean, I talk a lot in my videos about moderation. Like you do these HIIT exercises, you do it twice a week, you keep it short. But obviously that doesn't apply to someone who has a goal in an event. If you're going after fitness, there is no substitute for punishing yourself.
Right. You got to do it.
Yeah. Because if you're going to perform in an event, you need to do something similar to that event at that level of intensity and duration.
So fasting and high intensity exercise, but it's not doing CrossFit every day, 5 days a week.
Yeah.
Because that creates too much cortisol.
Correct.
Especially if you're older, past 30 or something, it's probably not as good to do that. Is something like that, a 45 to 60 minute CrossFit type of training once a week, you think okay, or is it still creating too much cortisol?
I think once or twice a week for the average person, if you feel good, I think is fine.
Yeah.
But again, when I have people come in to my clinic, those are people who have been to 20 different doctors. They have tried vegan and carnivore and low carb and yo-yo dieting and gluten-free. They've done all that. So these are people with challenges. And now if you're a little frail, now that's where you really have to be careful and get everything right. But if you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s, you're feeling fine, then go for it. Do one or two of those spin classes. And what I would caution though is pay attention. Notice how your body is reacting. How do you feel after the class? Are you exhausted? Are you stiff in the morning? Do you have trouble getting out of bed? Do your joints hurt the next day? Then you're probably doing too much.
Doing too much, yeah. And what about, we talked about fasting a little bit here. What are the top 3 benefits of intermittent fasting or longer fasting, 24-hour, 48-hour fasting that you've seen in your research?
So number 1 is lowering insulin. And with that, lowering blood sugar, losing weight, etc. The other big thing is that you induce something called autophagy. But that's with longer fasting. Autophagy it's called autophagy stands for self-eating. And that's where if you're putting food in your body, if you're putting especially protein in your body, there's plenty of resources. Your body knows, hey, there's some more coming. I can just use that to build tissue and to do the stuff I need. But if you stop putting it in, now it becomes a very, very scarce resource. So now your body has to figure out where else can I get this? And that's where autophagy, self-eating, comes in. So now your body upregulates its recycling mechanisms.
How long does it take to fast before autophagy starts?
So again, that's what everybody asks, and it's not a black or white. It's a continuous, it's a gradient. I would say that it barely starts around 16 to 18 hours. That's where you get like a trickle, but then it increases pretty fast, where there's a significant change between 18 and 24 hours.
Interesting.
And then it sort of takes off from there. So 48 hours into it, it's very significant.
48 hours into it.
Yeah.
So the longer you can go every, extra few hours, it continues to self-eat.
Yes.
The fat
Yes.
stored in your body more and
Yes. Yeah. So the self-eating now, part of what it eats is fat, obviously, because you're not adding any fuel. But the key with autophagy is protein, because you need protein to build the tissue. Your cells have so much of a lifespan, they break down, and then you have to make new ones. And you need protein for that. So when you don't add any, now you have to go look for some. And a lot of people will say, oh, well, that's where fasting is dangerous because you're going to eat up your muscles. The body is too smart for that because you need your muscles to go on the next hunt. So we have all these mechanisms to spare muscles, and that's why growth hormone increases also exponentially along with autophagy. And growth hormone is muscle sparing. It's basically telling the body, or one of the mechanisms that tell the body, don't use the muscle, go find something else. So now it gets much better at recycling these broken cells. It gets much better at finding any kind of resource like virus and bacteria and parasites that may also be made out of protein.
Really? And kind of eating those things, the bad things
Correct.
first. Interesting. What's the longest you've gone fasting?
The longest I've done is 5 days, or
No-
4.5.
No food, water only.
Just water.
Yeah, I've done 3 days.
Yeah.
And you see the benefits a lot after a
Yeah.
day and a half. You really start to see and feel the benefits.
Yeah.
By day 3, I went right up to 3, and I was like, okay, I was starting to get a little tired. And I think
Yeah.
I pushed it because I worked out twice, which
Yeah.
I'm probably not supposed to do, but I did like an incline walk for an hour, and which I don't recommend, but I was trying to be extreme.
Yeah, that's probably too much.
Yeah.
And this is where we come into this muscle sparing thing, that I'm all in favor of doing some exercise while you're fasting, because
Walking, though.
you're going to increase your ketones, you're going to increase your growth hormone. But if you're not adding any protein and you do something intense enough to break down muscle, now your body has to sort of juggle the resources. Like it has to repair those muscles, and where's the protein going to come from? So it might break down some other muscles to repair that.
Interesting.
Okay, I haven't seen specific research on this or anything. It's just kind of common sense. What would the body do?
Sure.
So I would exercise, but I would keep it to purely aerobic. I wouldn't even do HIIT, not even brief HIIT during those times.
Right. What did you do for those 4.5, 5 days?
I probably didn't do much of anything.
Right.
Probably
rest.
maybe a little bit of walking, but basically just my everyday activities.
Yeah. Did you feel pretty sharp after 2-3 days, or did you start to feel a little slower towards the end?
I don't feel as great as people tell me they feel.
Yeah, I feel so much energy.
Yeah, so I do okay. I don't feel any dramatic improvement in focus, but I do know that it happens because I get the testimonials, and I do know, especially for people who might have insulin resistance, when they fast, they're going to increase their ketones, which becomes the alternative brain fuel.
Right. And it also kind of helps heal certain things. If you've been driving the insulin, it's allowing that to recover more, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Your whole carbohydrate processing machine is recovering because you're not adding anything.
Right.
And one more thing about autophagy and fasting is for brain trauma. And this, I've hardly ever heard it spoken about, that the brain is kind of its own little world. up there inside the cranium. We have the blood-brain barrier, and a lot of things that go on in the brain are different than the way they work in the body. So the reason, for example, that spinal cord injuries are so devastating is that the nervous system is really poor at repairing itself, right? It's encased in bone for a reason. It's not supposed to get damaged. You're not supposed to crack your skull or break your spine. And that tissue is a little different. It's sensitive. And it doesn't have the capacity to repair itself very, very well. But if you have a concussion, for example, you get some tissue brain trauma, you get some inflammation, and about the only way that the brain can clean that up is through autophagy, the self-eating.
Our government told us to eat 6 to 11 servings of bread, rice, cereal, and pasta today, to eat a low-fat diet, and fats and oils were sparingly only at the top supposed to be eaten. And yet that advice led to the worst obesity epidemic and diabetes epidemic in the history of mankind.
That's like the food charts that we all saw in school, right?
Completely opposite of what we should be doing. Now, and so the science has caught up with this bad advice. And the advice, unfortunately, Lewis, was based on really shoddy science, on very weak evidence, on a few population studies, not really experimental studies. In fact, all the experimental studies that told us to eat low-fat diets, they actually didn't tell us that we should be doing that. They were actually contradicting the recommendations that were developed in 1980 by the UK and the USA.
Really?
So basically, if you looked at the actual randomized controlled trials there weren't that many, but there was a few of them, they all said that eating low-fat wasn't beneficial. But the population...
These were outside of the U.S. trials?
No, trials all over. Trials in the U.S.
Okay.
They just didn't look at that evidence. So the guideline committees who were working on it they sort of dismissed that evidence. And they had this theory, and they went with the theory. Because it made sense, right? If you look at calories, for example, fat has 9 calories per gram. Carbs and protein have 4 calories per gram. So you think, well, gee, if it has more calories per gram, if you eat less of it, you're going to lose more weight. It's logical.
Right.
But unfortunately, metabolism is not a math problem.
Yeah.
It's a metabolic problem. It's a hormonal problem. It's not energy balance. The whole idea of calories in, calories out. This is the biggest crock of that's been pushed on the American public, because there's a message implicit in that, which is if you just told someone to lose weight by eating less and exercising more, if they don't do it, it's their fault, right? Just eat less, exercise more. And if you don't, you're a lazy glutton. Right? So it's your fault you're fat.
Okay.
Right? But the truth is that it's not. It's not just about calorie balance. In fact, that's what the Global Energy Balance, quote, Global Energy Balance Network, which was actually funded by Coca-Cola, and they actually funded university scientists to kind of be the front people for this nonsense that's all about calories in, calories out, has been completely discredited. The New York Times wrote a big expose of this, but what we've been taught is that all calories are the same. They're actually not. So food is not just energy, it's actually information. It gives instructions, right? So this is like a big breakthrough in science, right? So food is not just calories, it's actually information. So the information in food communicates with your body every single minute. So every bite you take, it turns on or off genes that create health or disease, that make you lose or gain weight. It turns on or off hormones that make you lose or gain weight or create health or disease.
It's like a feedback for you.
It's direct instructions, and it works minute by minute. It's not something that takes a long time. It regulates inflammation. It regulates your hormones, as I said. It regulates your brain chemistry. It regulates even your gut microbiome, all the flora in your gut that we now know are linked to everything from weight gain, diabetes, to heart disease, to cancer, to autoimmune diseases, and so many other things.
It's the gut health, right?
Even depression and ADD and autism may be linked to changes in your gut flora. So we now know that when you eat food, it's not just about the energy in it. Because if that was true, then you could just survive on soda all day, and it wouldn't matter as long as you only eat 1,800 calories of soda. And I had this argument.
Right.
I had this argument with the vice chairman of Pepsi. We had dinner together, and I'm telling you.
No way.
Yeah, we had dinner. And the guy in between us, because I was sitting here, he's sitting here, the guy was like being in the middle of like a war zone. And I said to him, how can you say that eating 1,800 calories of soda is the same as having 1,800 calories of broccoli or almonds?
Right.
He says, well, as long as you have that amount of calories, you're not gonna. It's not gonna be any different. I said, this is just not how the body works.
You're not getting the nutritional value from that, right?
Right. I mean, it's not even nutritional. So just like look at 1,000 calories. Let's say 750 calories of broccoli is 21 cups, 35 grams of fiber, half a teaspoon of sugar, and tons of phytonutrients, phytochemicals that upregulate your genes that actually help you prevent cancer, that improve hormone metabolism. So many things, right? Same calories from a big gulp, 750 calories, 46 teaspoons of sugar, right? High fructose corn syrup upregulates your liver to turn on a fat production factory that makes high triglycerides.
Stores fat more, right?
Stores fat, lowers triglycerides. I mean, raises triglycerides, lowers the good cholesterol, causes a fatty liver, raises hormones that make you, in women, make them grow hair on their face and have lost hair on their head. Men, they drops their testosterone. They have no sex drive and they lose their hair on their bodies.
Think of all the amazing things in life that are expressions of just you. For instance, the song you stream over and over again while you're in your 13th hour of gaming at 4 a.m. in the morning, with all the lights off, trying not to wake up your roommates. Or the recommendations that you share with your friends on the top 6 comedy podcasts that are the best to listen to on your way to the gym and back. Or even your new haircut, which may or may not be an epic bowl cut from the 90s and hopefully is. Everything that makes you, you, makes all the difference. State Farm believes insurance should work the same way. Your plan, your coverage, they need to be personalized to you. And the ability to choose the plan you want by picking the options that fit you, like building your home and auto policies, is exactly what the State Farm Personal Price Plan is all about. Getting the coverage you want at an affordable price just for you. So, are you ready to make things personal? Call or go to statefarm.com today to create your State Farm Personal Price Plan. Prices vary by state. Options selected by customer, availability, and eligibility may vary.
All this from the same calories, right?
The number of calories.
Calories are the same, but the information in the food is very different. So now we have this concept that is actually really about the hormonal, I call it the hormonal hypothesis, which I talk about in Eat Fat, Get Thin, which is how do you change your hormones so you're not hungry all the time? Because
that's the key.
The typical advice, you eat low fat, and your fat actually makes you satisfied, right? Because if you eat fat, you're not craving all the time, you're not hungry, and it actually is a brain food because it actually stops the addiction center in the brain from turning on, so you never feel hungry or have any cravings. It also speeds up your metabolism. Fat speeds up your metabolism. Yeah,
so it helps you burn more fat.
Helps you burn more fat. It releases fat from the fat cells.
Interesting.
Right. So it makes you less hungry. It makes you burn more fat, and it liberates the fat from the fat cell. So it's really powerful. Whereas if you eat sugar, the opposite happens. You get hungrier because you increase insulin. I
used to have so much sugar.
It's terrible.
I was addicted to it.
All of us were. I mean, I was too. I was a vegetarian. I ate like tons of whole wheat bread and sugar and honey and everything. Grape nuts and ice cream for breakfast.
That was my life, right? So when did you stop? When did the research become known, or the facts or the data become known?
It's not even. It's honest. That's why I wrote this book.
Because you're a doctor and you were eating sugar.
No, it's not even.
When did you start to realize, and when did this information about fat become?
Well, it's been mounting for decades, right? So it's building on a mountain of evidence. And in the book, I reviewed over 1,000 studies, or 500 quoted in the book that I referenced. They wouldn't let me put more because there was no room in the back of the book.
Yeah.
And it's all well documented, and the science of this is very powerful. One of my colleagues, David Ludwig, wrote a book called Always Hungry. He's a Harvard professor, and he's done a lot of the research that this is based on, where he gave 2 groups of people same calories, but changed the percents of fat and carbs. And it was a very well-controlled study. And in the first group, they had 60% carbs, 20% fat, 20% protein. The other group switched it, 60% fat, 20% carbs, 20% protein. So it's the opposite. And the group that had the high-fat diet burned 300 calories more a day by doing nothing else.
Really? Just by having more fat?
By eating more fat. Their metabolism sped up 300 calories a day. It's like running.
Same amount of calories, though.
They ate the same amount of calories in.
But they burned 300 more.
Right, because their metabolism sped up.
Interesting.
Right. So in other words, it's like running an hour a day without getting off the couch.
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
That's powerful.
Very powerful.
Yeah. And I know for me, as I've seen myself and my patients transformation's amazing, and their cholesterol gets better. It's totally contradictory.
Yeah.
Right? Fat is supposed to raise your cholesterol, right? Eating cholesterol is supposed to raise your cholesterol. But for the first time since the dietary guidelines came out in 1980, the U.S. government in 2015 completely reversed their stance on fat. There's
Really?
no more
When did this
restriction.
happen?
Like first week of January 2016.
This year.
This year.
Like a few weeks ago.
A few weeks ago.
They just changed this.
They changed this completely.
the whole guide.
Completely. So
Really?
First time they said, forget about fat. You can eat as much as you want.
No way.
No limit on fat.
This is the government,
The
huh?
government, the Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee established these recommendations. This is a scientific group that establishes guidelines for the government, helps them shape policy, and then the government makes the policy. They kind of
Based around this research or this
yeah,
committee.
they said, don't worry about fat, don't worry about cholesterol. Eggs are back, right? Eggs are back. Forget about the egg white omelets, just eat the whole egg.
No way.
Completely. And they said it made me laugh. They said cholesterol is no longer a nutrient of concern, quote, nutrient of concern. Like, well, we got it wrong for 35 years.
No way.
Yeah.
So it's like...
It's totally different. And they also said that we should, for the first time, they said we should reduce sugar. Now, the policy advisors, who are the scientists, said we should limit sugar-sweetened beverages because they're proven to be linked to obesity and diabetes. But the government, because of the food lobby, changed the wording to say, no, we should be restricting added sugars. So we should eat less added sugars. Now, what's an added sugar? It doesn't say added sugar on the label.
Right.
So how do you know? Because the food labeling from the FDA is also influenced by the food lobby.
Right.
So it should say added sugar on the label, not just sugar. Right. So you don't know.
Right.
So
Interesting.
it's designed to totally confuse people. But the truth is that this is a huge advance, and now we actually have come to realize that this is not true. So the science around fat and how your body burns fat and what makes you fat is all really clear now. And it's all based on this hormone idea of insulin, which is a fat storage hormone.
Yes.
So anything you eat that increases insulin, which is sugar, refined flour. I mean, white flour raises your blood sugar more than table sugar. So if you had 2 slices of white bread, it raises your blood sugar more than a tablespoon of
way.
table sugar. You're like, I'm eating whole wheat bread. It's just as bad. Unless the bread is so dense that you can stand on it without it squishing, then you shouldn't eat it.
Shouldn't eat it.
No, like the German rye
Gosh,
bread.
I love bread, though.
Yeah, everybody
That's a
loves
challenge.
bread. Now, the bread we eat isn't the bread we ate, right? So our
Right.
ancestors ate very
It's
different
not
bread.
the hard bread.
It was
It's
very
like,
coarse, and
Yeah.
we only had the grain mills that started in the 1800s. Before that, we couldn't eat refined grain, and now even whole wheat is super refined. It's just
and are all grains bad as well, in your opinion?
No, I don't think all grains are bad. I joke. I say, in the book, I talk about, an induction plan, like basically a way to get quick start to change you from like just being storing fat to burning fat to eating fat to makes you thin. And that's a 21-day plan. And after that, I talk about how you transition to what I call a Pagan diet. Pagan, as opposed to paleo or vegan. It was kind of a joke because one day I was sitting
in between.
Yeah, I was sitting on a panel with 2 friends of mine. One was a vegan cardiologist, and the other was like a paleo doctor.
Sure.
And I was like, well, I don't know. I guess I must be a Pagan because I'm in the middle here.
Okay. What does a Pagan diet look like?
So Pagan diet, what's amazing, Louis, is that the principles of paleo vegan are often very similar. So both groups believe that we should be eating whole, unprocessed, unrefined foods.
Yes.
We should get rid of food additives,
Foods
hormones.
from the ground.
Yeah, everything. Yeah. No antibiotics, no hormones, no pesticides, no GMO. We should be having no MSG, no artificial sweeteners, no high fructose corn syrup. Everybody agrees that that's true. We also agree that everybody should be eating lots of fruits and vegetables.
Yes.
Right? A little heavy on the plant foods.
Yep.
Basic principles. Both agree that we shouldn't have dairy, which is interesting.
Yes.
Right? We'll talk about that.
Paleo, no dairy as well.
No
right?
dairy, right.
Yeah.
No dairy. No
I guess
vegan.
there's some of them that say like some specific cheeses or something.
Yeah,
or,
grass-fed butter. There's some things, but but the proteins in dairy are very inflammatory, and the dairy again we eat isn't the dairy we ate. We've hybridized our cows; it's all fertilized by one bull.
It's not organic dairy.
And it's not organic. It's not raw. It's not how our ancestors ate it. Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Even organic cows, they milk them when they're pregnant, and they're full of hormones. So,
okay.
And also, it's just not always tolerated well by many people.
Right.
And then,
what else do they both have in common?
Everybody agrees that we should be eating foods that that are phytonutrient rich, that are nutrient dense, and we should eat lots of nuts and seeds and lots of good oils like avocados and olive oil.
What's phytonutrient? What does that mean?
Phytonutrient is a chemical that's in plant foods. Phyto means plant, and it's not a vitamin or mineral. It's not a protein, fat, or carb or fiber. It's something else. So, for example, like broccoli has glucosinolates, which upregulates detoxification.
Okay.
Catechins are in green tea, which are powerful detoxifiers of metal, powerful antioxidants. Tomatoes have lycopene, which is a powerful cancer preventer for prostate cancer.
Okay.
Anthocyanidins. You can have black rice, which has anthocyanidins, which are powerful antioxidants that are in black rice. It's emperor's rice. Love that. It's also very low glycemic.
Sure.
So I think the things that they disagree on are basically beans, grains, and meat. Like where you get your protein from. Everything else is the same.
Paleo and vegan is the same. Except for meat, beans,
and protein. I mean, beans, grains, and protein.
Beans, grains, and protein. Okay.
Right. And I mean, meat.
Right.
And so,
Sure.
What I realize is that, I think many people who are sick do better when you take out certain things that can be inflammatory or high glycemic. So if you're, for example, carbohydrate intolerant and you're diabetic, which affects a lot of people, I talk about how do you find out if you're carbohydrate intolerant in the book, which is there's a questionnaire you can tell if you actually know if you're someone who's carbohydrate intolerant, like someone who's gluten intolerant. That means if they eat a lot of starch, if they have like 2 cups of rice, even if it's brown rice or 2 cups of beans, it can adversely affect their sugar. So I talk about like having less, like having smaller portions of beans and grains.
Sure.
And non-gluten grains in particular, because gluten can be very inflammatory for many people. I think for some people who don't react to it, it can be fine, but not in large amounts. And then I think meat is the big issue, right? So meat is the big issue. So should we be eating meat?
We were just had dinner the other night.
Right.
We both had meat, right?
We had fish.
We had fish.
We had black cod.
Yes, that's great.
Which was awesome.
I had a mahi. You had a black cod. Is that what it was?
Oh, you had I had the black cod.
Yeah.
I had the black cod. The guy next to me had meatballs.
Yeah. Guy next to me had carne asada.
But so the issues around meat also I think are everybody agrees, and fish. Everybody agrees that if anybody eats meat, it should be humanely raised. It should be sustainably raised. It should be grass-fed. It should be not harming the environment. The ethical and the environmental issues around animal eating are big and they're real.
Yeah.
I mean, I have many Buddhist patients. I have a Buddhist monk who's like an abbot who's is a diabetic, and he's never going to eat an animal. I need to help him understand he's never going to eat an egg, how to eat a higher fat protein diet, which is low glycemic.
Right.
So we can do that.
Okay.
Right. So more nuts and seeds. Less rice, more beans. Just there's strategies for doing that.
Sure.
And he did great. He lost 35 pounds, reverses diabetes, and now I have tons of people, praying for me.
That's great.
Yeah, and then the meat thing is tricky because it's also an environmental risk. If you're eating factory farmed animals, there's antibiotics in that, and there's runoff from the pesticides and fertilizers that damages our water supply and rivers and lakes. There's climate change that happens from the methane produced. It's more toxic to the environment than carbon dioxide. There's high energy use. 1/5 of all our fossil fuels are used for growing animals for human consumption. Our water is being used up at incredible rates for feeding animals. There's basically I think 70% of all water use, and there's basically only 5% of the world's surface is fresh water.
It's usable.
It's fresh water.
Yeah.
Right, 1% is in Russia.
Wow.
And at least 4% for the rest of us, and 70% of that is being used for feeding animals for human consumption. So there's real environmental issues.
Sure.
So I think a factory farming should be not supported in any way, and we need to change that. And that means we need to change our patterns of consumption around meat. We need to downsize our meat consumption. I call it having condiment. Condiment, as opposed to like a condiment, like condiment. It should be a side dish or a dressing if you're going to eat it.
Sure.
And I think
not a full plate of steak. You mean?
I think there's 3 issues with meat, right? There's environmental issues, there's moral issues, and there's health issues. So we kind of talked about the moral. I think that's people are entitled to their beliefs, and they should be able to follow whatever they want and be healthy. The environmental issues are real, and I think everybody would agree, whether they're paleo vegan, that we need to stop harming the environment. And I think even if you're not paleo vegan, everybody really believes that. In fact, the Dietary Advisory committee that was advising the government said we should limit meat consumption because of the environmental impact. Right now, if you have grass-fed meat, if you have sustainably raised meat, you can't. It's not as abundant. You can't produce as much, and so we all have to eat less of it.
Right,
and it's more expensive. So, but that's okay. And I think that from a health point of view, when I really looked at the literature, and I did this in Eat Fat Get Thin, I looked at all the research that I could find on meat because I'm like, well, I don't know.
You want to know for yourself too.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm recommending to my patients. I'm a human too, and I want to live a long time, and I don't want to be doing something stupid.
Yeah.
So I wanted to find out what does the science tell us about meat.
So you did all the research.
So I looked at all the research, and I wrote 8,000 words in the book on meat.
Wow.
There's a lot of research in there. And I addressed all these issues, environmental, moral, and the health issues were quite interesting. When we look at the studies on meat, and anybody can quote anything saying anything, right?
Right.
So you want the paleo people like, meat's healthy, here's all the research. And the vegan like, meat's going to kill you, here's all the research.
Yeah.
So it's like, and then you're at the average Joe, you're totally confused. And your average doctor, you're totally confused because we get no training in nutrition.
And they haven't done the research themselves.
No,
they're going off of their opinion or their theory.
Yeah, they're like average people like the rest of us in terms of nutrition science. They don't know because it's not what we learn, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I just am at Cleveland Clinic, and we implemented a nutrition curriculum for the first time in the medical school. They have this integrated in, which is so great. And
that's awesome.
I helped Tim Ryan, who's a congressman from Ohio, introduce Tim. You love
great.
Tim. He's great. Has he been on the show?
He's been on here, yeah.
He's great. Introduce a bill called the Enrich Act, which was a bill that is funding $15 million to fund nutrition in medical schools, nutrition education for doctors.
Interesting. That's what we need the most because doctors, a lot of the time, I feel like could heal a lot of their patients through food.
Oh my God. Well, food is the cause of most chronic disease. It's the cure for most chronic disease, and yet doctors know nothing about food.
And they just medicate a lot of the times.
I mean, listen, it's so bad. I mean, I use food as medicine. That's what food is the most powerful drug on the planet. I mean, that's why last week I was in Cleveland at the hospital teaching 300 black women how to cook in a cooking class. Like, that's what doctors should be doing because that's how I'm going to get people healthy.
That's real medicine, right?
That's real medicine.
Now, just a quick side note. What is your involvement what is functional medicine and what is your involvement at the Cleveland Clinic?
Can I finish my meat?
Yes, go ahead.
I was still rolling on the meat, and then we'll talk about functional medicine, and then we'll talk about Cleveland Clinic.
Perfect.
Because people want to know. Like, they're like, well, what about meat? They're like probably listening.
Let's do it.
So the science.
8,000 words.
I'm not going to give you 8,000 words, but I'll give you a few hundred.
Perfect.
So the science of meat was fascinating. So when I looked at the studies that showed it was harmful, here's what they were. They were mostly population studies, meaning they looked at groups of people, followed them, and then they asked questions of them. What did you eat last year? What did you eat last week? What did you last month? And they basically do these food frequency questionnaires, and then they correlate that with the risk of disease. And I try to control for all the confounding factors, but it's very tough. So the people who ate meat, they had more heart disease and more cancer and more death. But what else was...
They were smoking, they were drinking,
exactly.
they weren't sleeping,
right, exactly.
stressed out.
So if you look at the data, they ate 800 more calories a day.
Yeah.
They almost ate no fruits and vegetables.
Tons of sugar.
They had tons of sugar and processed food, lots of fried foods. Drank more, smoked more, didn't exercise, and didn't take any vitamins and minerals. Well, guess what? They weren't as healthy as the other people. So most of the studies were like that. Now, there was a few studies that were interesting I found. One was a study of 11,000 people who shopped at health food stores. And they found there were like a lot of vegetarians and a lot of meat eaters. So who are the people who are, like healthy meat eaters who only eat grass-fed meat or who... Because most of these studies were not on grass-fed meat either. They were on factory farm meat, right? So then again, how do you generalize that?
Sure.
But then there were these 11,000 people, and they followed them for many years, and they found that the meat eaters and the vegetarians, there was no difference in their health outcomes. Exactly the same. So if you're a meat eater who basically eats a healthy diet and has grass-fed meat versus a vegan or vegetarian, no difference in health outcomes.
And you have a healthy
Healthy lifestyle, then there's no difference.
Before the interview continues, if you feel like you're not living your most authentic life, not leaning into your purpose, and not living the life that your future self would be extremely proud of, I've written a new book called The Greatness Mindset, and I think you're gonna love this. Through powerful stories, science-backed strategies, and step-by-step guidance, The Greatness Mindset will help you overcome all the different challenges in your life to design the life of your dreams and then turn it into your reality. Make sure to click the link below in the description to get your copy today. Okay, let's get back to this video. When was the moment that was the make or break moment for you? That you said, enough is enough, or never again, or I gotta start this journey the real way, like I'm going all in. When was that moment?
There was a period in 2002. I had fallen in love with this girl when I was 16, and we were really, really good friends. She says we were best friends, and she had zero interest in me romantically.
You were in the friend zone.
I was in the friend zone.
Yeah.
Fine.
16 years old.
16 years old.
What was your weight like then?
I was heavy, but I wasn't quite as heavy
like
as
200,
I'd become.
250, 300.
You know, I wasn't, even then, it's like I wasn't getting on scales often.
Right.
I certainly wasn't 500 pounds. I actually have a picture of us from when we were 16 and we were hanging out. And I'm a heavy guy, but I'm not morbidly obese.
Yeah.
We became romantic in 2002, and there was just a moment where I was like, oh, if I'm going to make this work, if this really has a shot at longevity, I got to change, because she likes to do stuff like take a hike and spend the day at the beach and go to museums, and I can't do that, you know. So that was kind of it. It was like, how I want to have this relationship with her, so I must change. It was a bizarre kind of counterintuitive conversation that I had with her too, because having it, I was scared, like, if I have this conversation, she'll know that I'm overweight, like that I'm obese. As if
she didn't know.
As if she didn't know. It was like this thing, if I show her that this is something I want to change, not just like this masculine thing of like I'm showing weakness, it wasn't that. It was, this is the hardest, this thing is so unconfrontable, I never think about it. I push it away. It's almost become something subconscious. So if I bring it to the forefront and I say, let's address this, that's a very scary and narrow path to walk, because failure, I figure life is failure at that point, you know?
Yeah. So that was 2002. Did you start going all in? Was it dabbling a little bit and kind of lost weight, went back off the wagon? What was that like for the next 18 years till now?
I went all in, and I'm a sober guy too, so I went all in a very in a similar fashion to achieving sobriety, which was admit that I'm powerless and turn my problem over to somebody else and go like, I am incapable of figuring this out right now. I'm going to do exactly what you say until we get to the point that I can take over. And she was like, great, here's what you're going to do. I've went and found a guy who has a liquid diet. You can do it for up to 2 months. Why don't you do that? You don't have to do it for 2 months. You could do it for 1 month. You could do it for 2. Let's see how this goes. And I crushed that.
2 months liquid diet.
80 pounds.
Wow.
2 months.
This is not like drinking Cokes all day liquid diet. This is no sugar liquid diet.
This is like, I mean, the calories were so low. It was like 3 weird protein shakes with some green powder and a ton of supplements that were, I think, mostly fiber and some vitamins, and as much water as I could drink, and that's it.
80 pounds, 2 months.
80 pounds.
But that's still in the 400 zone.
Yeah, but
you must
I
have
will
seen
say this. Of all the weight I've gained and lost, I never dipped back into those 80 pounds. Never once. So it was such a prize that I've never gotten close to like back into that zone. And I followed that up with, I don't even know what the diet's called. It might have been like a blood type diet or something. And it was kind of on that where I realized like, well, I'm gonna have to try different diets. And I tried basically every diet that exists.
What worked the best for you?
The easiest thing was keto.
Yeah.
Because I just didn't have to think about anything.
You can eat lots of meat. It's just eliminate certain things and eat as kind of as much as you want of other stuff, right?
Yeah, and and that worked to a degree. As I had less and less weight to lose, I found that I had to like mess around with what I was eating. Because when I first started, it was like, you can eat bacon and Swiss cheese all day long. Like, okay, well, that's easy. And I would, and I'd lose weight, and I'd be like, this is a magical diet. And I'm putting mayonnaise on everything, and I'm losing weight. How is this possible? My little salad would have 4 cups of salad dressing on it, and, no sugar, but like a ton of fat.
Yeah.
And that did work. and I was able to do it, and it was super easy for traveling. You just rip the bread off stuff and eat steaks, and it's actually, I think, designed to be easy to get around the world and eat this way. Once I got really close to, there were two periods. There was a period in 2012 where I was super into cycling, and I got really lean, much smaller than I am
190
now.
or something, or one?
I was just about 200, but that's tiny for me. And you think about 200, that's still, you're a big dude, but that was really, really small for me. And I just noticed that if I was eating only fat, I was suffering on the bicycle. Like, I wasn't as efficient on the bicycle. So some sugars, gels,
carbs,
some carbs entered my diet, and like I would fly up hills, which was really cool. Then I had a bad accident. My wife told me that I wasn't ever going to make a living riding a bike. I thought we were rich and that I could retire and just ride my bike at like 35 years old forever. That was not the case. She said I had to go work again. So I went back to acting, and the bike kind of fell away, and I started doing like CrossFit and rowing machines. I could crush a full marathon on a rowing machine, no problem. And then at some point I was kind of having trouble finding work, and kept hearing like, well, you're not the big guy, the heavy, lovable guy anymore. So there was a point where I was like, okay, I'm just going to eat and lift weights and see what happens. And I ate whatever I wanted for about a year and lifted weights and got pretty near 400 pounds again.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you gained 200 pounds within a year.
Yeah.
Close.
Well, no, it was really from like 3 years. It was 3 years. Yeah. 2013.
Now,
to
how long did you pause from acting?
2010, and pause is not quite the right word. I did a few pilots that didn't get picked up.
Sure.
But I was putting no effort into it. It was like, if they called me and said, please come do our pilot, I would do it.
Right.
But
You're not going
wasn't-
on auditions. You're not.
No, I was really just riding my bike.
When you've been in, how many movies you've been in? And TV shows?
I've never counted. I actually have no
50
idea.
plus, you think?
Yeah.
At least, right?
Yeah.
When you've been in that many movies or shows, do you have to audition anymore?
Yeah, sure.
You still have to audition?
Yeah, definitely.
Really? Even if they've seen all your work, they know what you can do?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's just a matter of the director wanting to see if you're exactly what he wants for this specific project, or now that I'm physically different, what is that going to look like, But yeah, I still have to audition.
What was when you look back, what do you think the thing is that drew you to eating as a bad habit, or an addiction, or a mind-numbing process that was a part of your life for so long? Was there a number of events? Was there moments? Was there something that connected you to that?
I've tried to do like self-psychoanalysis on this, and I get to a point where I'm 5 years old. I go to visit my grandparents in Vermont, and their reaction to me. And if I look at a picture of myself as at 5 years old today, I see just like a normal, healthy kid with maybe some chubby cheeks, right? Their reaction to me was like, oh my God, what are your parents doing to you? You have gone to crap, right? This is out of hand. We need to get this under control. And my favorite food was lasagna, which my grandpa would always make me. Yeah, and he had it cooking. As I arrived, I could smell it. And I'm there visiting them for the first time without my mom or dad in Vermont, like super excited. Their reaction is this, and then they basically were like, you can't have a second helping of lasagna. So in that day was the first time that I snuck food, and it was clearing the table and eating food off their plates.
At the same time, like clearing it and like...
Yeah, just stuffing in a few bites, because I was not allowed to. Like, I reached for a second helping and got my hand patted. Like, no.
At 5.
Yeah, that's off limits. You eat what we tell you to do. And then the next day, they weighed me first thing in the morning, which I'd never been on a scale before, and I'm being weighed. And then it was like, okay, we're going on on a 1 mile walk that is for your benefit. And this did a number of things. It developed the sneaking food habit, it developed the habit of wanting to eat privately, and the idea that people witnessing me eating was not good. And it also created a weird barrier to me just naturally wanting to be outside and active, because at 5 I was very active, running around. But when it was enforced, when it was this point of like
A punishment almost.
yeah, we're not consulting how willing you are to do this. We're not saying, is there something you'd like to do outside? We're saying you must go march on this. It was like a mile to their mailbox and a mile back. And like, this is not for fun. This is for because you have gotten so overweight. That really pushed the idea of physical activity into another punishment type thing where I just didn't want to do it anymore. So it was kind of this wild confluence of new mental structures that I built, where it was like, well, I'm going to sneak food now and I'm going to not do activities.
How insecure were you about your weight when you got older and started recognizing it, or seeing maybe someone make fun of you, or realizing like, oh, I can't go on a hike with my girlfriend or my friends and do these certain activities? Did you feel insecure about it ever, or was it more of just, this is who you are?
I definitely felt insecure about it. I also got into a lot of fights as a kid and was like, you know, there were a few times in elementary school where like some preschooler would say like, wow, look how fat he is. And that obviously wasn't going to fight a little preschooler. And you come to learn like, well, avoid little kids at all costs, because they just say, they see something and they just talk about it. And that made me terribly uncomfortable. But if like another 10-year-old said something like that to me, we would just have a fight. And then people would know like, oh, he's like not a nice guy in that circumstance.
Yeah.
We're not going to say that to him, you know?
Yeah. So how did you get into acting and being such a successful actor while also having this kind of insecurity, or knew that you stood out in a different way than most of the other actors in Hollywood?
There was like, in school, I didn't really like school either. I grew to really dislike anything done from a point of authoritarianism.
Yeah.
I just was not for me. So if it's like you're going on a diet, or you have to do sports, or you have to study, I was not into it. Which is really bizarre, because now I love nothing more than a diet I find for myself, and studying something I'm interested in, and finding a sport to be interested. Like I can become obsessive about these things and do them 110% if it's my own determination. But from a point of authority, it just didn't fly. And I noticed a couple of things. I was never like a class clown, but we had an actor in my school, and so much more attention was paid to the fact that he was an actor than any of his physical attributes, any of his other accomplishments in school. It was like this distraction, this like, here's who this person is, but like, here's this weird identity that actually has nothing to do with him, that we're all gonna focus on that. And there was something kind of magical about that. Like, I can't like kill people with jokes, that's just not what I do. But what if I had that too? What
You're not
if
super sexy and attractive
I'm
with
not
a
going to do
six-pack.
any, yeah. But I could create this other identity that would distract people from how fat I am, and talking about that, or poking fun at me, or even wanting to talk to me about it. Because like, I'll just show them this. What if I do this? So and it got you out of school. Because this dude would leave school for weeks at a time and go hang out on sets, and like, guess what's on a set? Craft services on a set. And
free food all day.
And you got a trailer, like you can fill your pockets with food and go back to your trailer and eat it. Like it's this wonderful place. It was like
unlimited food supply.
Oh my God. And then there was also like always gonna be like some grip who had a prescription of Percocet that you could like give a wink to,
yeah.
and like and by the way, it always started legitimately. Like my feet hurt, my ankles and my knees hurt. Like these are real things.
You're on set 18 hours a day. You're doing this over and over.
Like none of it is just irrational.
How many calories should we be eating a day? What's like a healthy range?
You know what's funny about this? Your body is actually pretty good at telling you how much to eat. The problem is, we eat. I know your people watching right now are probably like, "What are you talking about? That's not true." It is. The problem is, we eat foods. About 70% of our diets are made up of foods that have been carefully engineered to make us overeat. And there's a lot of money and science that goes into doing this. Ultra processed foods are very powerful at making us overeat.
Snack foods with salt and sugar and
Just a combination of things that, everything from the texture to the mouthfeel.
Tastes so good.
Yes, just how it affects your body. So they've done some really good studies on this. They've done studies where they'll take groups of people in not too many controlled studies in diet. So these are really good. They actually put them in a lab and they say, you guys over here eat as much as you want. You guys over here eat as much as you want. This group over here has whole natural foods. This group over here has ultra-processed foods. And they even control for the macros. So proteins, fats, and carbs are pretty similar. Then they take the groups and they switch them, okay? On average, and now we have multiple studies to show this, people will eat about 600 more calories a day from eating ultra-processed foods. So to give another example, if I were to put 5 or 6 plain boiled potatoes, no salt, no butter, nothing, just plain boiled potatoes in front of you, and I told you to eat them in 30 minutes, it'd be really hard for you. After the second or third potato, you'd be gagging. You'd hit palate fatigue.
Potatoes?
Yes, just plain, right? But if they gave you a family-sized bag of potato chips, which has...
Of course, the whole bag with like 2,000 calories or something.
Which has similar amounts of food in it, actually more calories because of the oil, you'd be able to eat them. That's the power of ultra-processed foods and how palatable they are. So I used to do this with my clients, simply telling people the following. Eat as much as you want, just avoid ultra-processed foods. You would typically see a 10 to 15 pound weight loss.
Wow.
Just from that.
If you're eating whole foods, there's only so much you can eat.
You hit palate fatigue faster. It's far more satiating. You just eat more appropriately. Our bodies, there's this myth that we're wired to overeat. We're just wired to just eat like crazy and just become obese. That's not true. We're not wired to do that. Overeating was just as bad for us thousands of years ago as it was today. You could have digestive issues. You could have died from that. Our bodies are pretty good at regulating. This is more complex than what I'm saying, but these particular foods make you overeat. Simply avoiding them and even telling yourself, I'll eat as much as I want. Fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, meats, foods that have 1 or 2 ingredients, right? You'll find that your average calorie intake will probably decrease by about 500 to 600. Some people even more.
A day.
Wow. On average.
And just that you'll lose weight.
That's it. Yeah. That's it. And then if you want to take it even a step further, if you add to that, here's a couple behavioral things that you could do that make that even more effective. Whole natural foods. I'm not going to limit myself. And I like saying this because when we're in the mindset of limiting ourselves, it plays a lot of tricks on us and it's really hard. So don't limit yourself, just eat all natural foods. And then here's the second one. Don't eat while distracted. In other words, when you eat, don't be on your phone, don't watch TV, just sit down and eat your meal.
Why?
That results in about 10% reduction in caloric intake, just from doing that alone.
Why is that?
We're not in tune with our body's signals of satiety.
We're not focused and present on the food.
Correct.
So we're distracted and we just keep eating and eating and eating.
Yes, we actually eat faster doing it that way as well. So what happens is the signal of satiety doesn't get registered quite as quickly when we're distracted. Also, being distracted could cause emotional changes, stress, anxiety, whatever, which also can create bad relationships with nutrition. Like one of the worst things you could do is eat while watching stressful news or something like that.
You're going to eat more, you're going to be stressed out.
Absolutely, right? So that's the second one. So, and they sound so simple, but they make such a huge impact on people. A third one you could do even, and this is another really easy one, is when you eat your meals, eat the protein first.
Over the vegetables?
Everything. Just eat the protein first, then eat everything else.
Why is that?
Protein is, in comparison to carbohydrates and fats, very satiating. So it produces a lot of satiety, right? It satisfies you. And the second reason is, and we now have what are called CGMs, right? Continual glucose monitors. The data on them is coming back, and it's pretty clear that if you eat protein first, the spike in blood
Insulin,
sugar.
Yeah, blood sugar.
Yeah, it's blunted. Now, why is that important? A spike and then subsequent drop in blood sugar tends to promote cravings. It tends to make us want to eat more to get that blood sugar back up. So eating the protein first tends to result in, through the satiety and through the blunting effects of blood sugar, tends to produce better satiety, make us eat less. So like those are three things right there, Lewis, that if people just did those three things and didn't say to themselves, I got to restrict, I got to cut, I got to whatever, they would find over time that they would just start to lose weight and they would eat more appropriately.
Wow. That's not working out more, that's not moving your body more, that's just through nutritional eating.
Yes, and to speak about moving more, the burning calories approach to weight loss is a losing,
Really?
total losing strategy. Yeah. Oh yeah, the data on that's very clear. Burning calories manually, our bodies do a terrific job of adapting and of
Storing fat, you're saying.
and slowing down its calorie burn. We have a range within our current lean body mass, okay? We have a range of calories our bodies can burn. So there's like more efficient, less efficient. And burning calories manually, at first your body's burning more calories, but eventually your body knows how to make up for that and make you burn less calories. So the studies on tons of exercise for weight loss are pretty clear. It's a terrible approach.
Really?
Now, it's not to say you don't get health benefits from moving more. You still get health benefits, but from a weight loss perspective, it's a terrible strategy. Now, there are some forms of exercise, one in particular, that can boost metabolic rate.
What's that?
Strength training.
Lifting, yeah.
Strength training is very effective. There was a study done with modern hunter-gatherers, the Hadza tribe of northern Tanzania. So they live the way that humans lived thousands of years ago, right? So they don't have electronics, they hunt, they gather. In comparison to the average Westerner, they're very active. Scientists went and studied them, and through some pretty sophisticated testing, tested their metabolic rates. How many calories are they burning every single day? And what they found was they were burning generally the same amount of calories as the average Western couch potato.
Really?
Yeah, and now you think at first, well, that's crazy, they're moving so much. But actually it makes sense. Our bodies would not have, if we burned 6,000 calories a day as hunter-gatherers, we wouldn't be here. 6,000 calories in a hunter-gatherer society is hard to come by. So our bodies learn to adapt. Now, strength training, on the other hand, tends to have a different effect. The main adaptation with strength training is to build muscle, the side effect of which is, and if you fuel it, you have to also feed your body appropriately to do this. But if you feed your body properly and strength train, the tendency is for the metabolism to boost or to go up. So you can see through this process, and I've done this many, many times with people, where they'll come and hire me, we'll lose 30 pounds, and we can eat more at the end of this process than we did before the process.
More calories or just more food?
All of it. Yeah. Which,
And they lose fat.
oh yeah, they're leaner. They're leaner. They have a little bit more lean body mass, 5 to 10 pounds, depending on male or female. But they're burning more calories than they went into. Now, why is this important? Well, it's a great buffer. If you have a fast metabolism today, this is a wonderful buffer against the challenges of modern living, which is sedentary and food everywhere, super accessible. So fast metabolism today is an asset, whereas 10,000 years ago, it might have been a liability. So strength training does that. Now, strength training doesn't burn as many calories as like running, but remember I said that really doesn't make a big difference because your body learns to adapt to that anyway. But the strength training does contribute to a faster metabolism over time, or at the very least, help prevent or mitigate the metabolic adaptation or slowdown that tends to happen when we reduce calories to lose weight. And then there's more to that. Because of the muscle building process, you see the balancing of hormones that we're all kind of looking for. Like in men, you see more testosterone, higher androgen receptor density. This is what testosterone attaches to. You see more appropriate levels of cortisol, a balancing of estrogen and progesterone. In women, growth hormone tends to be more youthful because when I tell my body to build muscle, my body organizes its hormones in a way to do so. And the hormone profile that contributes to muscle building just so happens to be the youthful hormone profile that we're looking for.
Interesting.
So when I recommend exercise to people, average person, who I know, like, okay, maybe we'll get them to do this 2 days a week, if we do a good job, I tell them, if you're gonna pick just one form, do strength training. That's going to be the most effective one. And then if you add something else, then it'd be great if you added some cardiovascular and some mobility or flexibility training.
Wow. So if you can only choose one, strength training or cardio, you're saying strength training all day.
100%. 100%.
Building muscle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's far more protective. It's going to boost your metabolism, which will make being obese harder. It balances out your hormones better. Muscle sticks around longer than the calorie burning effects of whatever you're getting from the form of exercise. Once you stop your workout, there's the calorie burn, which, like I said earlier, your body adapts to anyway. But when you build muscle, it sticks around for a little while before you start to lose it. And you develop something called muscle memory, which I know you understand as an athlete, right? Have you ever broken a bone or anything like that? Okay.
Yeah.
You take the cast off, muscle or your arms. But very quickly it bounces back. There's something called muscle memory. So if you build muscle and let's say you stop for whatever reason exercising and then you go back to working out, you'll gain that muscle back in a small fraction of the time. So it's a more, for lack of a better term, because there's no permanence when it comes to this, but it's a more permanent form of results or fitness, which just so happens to fit perfectly with the challenges of modern life. When you look at the average person and you're saying, okay, what are the challenges that are preventing them from being healthier? It's, okay, I'm surrounded by tons of food. I'm inactive. Is there something that can protect me against inactivity, which muscle does very well? Hormone imbalances now are rampant. And there's going to be times when even the most consistent average person, not fitness fanatic, is going to not work out for a month or two. Is there something that'll help them bounce back faster? Strength training it just tends to do that.
What about training where it's half strength training and half cardio? It's like, like an Orange Theory or something like this where you're doing like 20, 30 minutes of lifting, kind of like in between different sets, maybe not to failure or fatigue, but intense, lifting and then some 2 to 3 miles of running with intervals. What does that do for the body, for weight loss, for metabolism? Yeah,
so I want to be clear, all forms of exercise, so long as they're applied appropriately, are going to benefit you. Yes. So all forms of exercise have benefit so long as they're not overdone or inappropriate for the individual. So that being said, strength training needs to be, in order to reap the real benefits of strength training, it has to be applied in a particular way. Otherwise, it ends up becoming cardio with weights. So if I did it like a bunch of circuits, even though I'm doing curls and presses and rows, really what I'm doing is just a lot of cardio. I'm just using weights. Okay, so if you really want to reap the benefits of strength training, you want to train in the way that builds strength and muscle. Now, I do want to be careful because I'm probably invoking images of bodybuilders with veins coming out of their neck and they're, you mentioned it, right? Intensity, failure, lifting, whatever. That's not what most people need to do, okay? Most people would derive tremendous benefits if they went to the gym and strength trained and they did traditional do a set, rest for a minute, do a set, rest for a minute. But the way that they did their set was practice. So the exercise as a skill, that's what we want to look at. So rather than I'm going to go in here to beat up my legs, I'm going to go practice squats. Rather than I'm going to go hammer my shoulders, I'm going to practice overhead presses. This tends to lead to more appropriate applications of exercise, and you see a more consistent, strength gains, more consistent muscle gains, and far less risk injury. So intensity, although it's an important factor to manipulate, people over-apply it. They think that
you have a failure on everything.
No, that's not the case. Like I said earlier, you need to have more energy at the end of your workout, and you probably shouldn't feel sore, or if you do feel a little sore, the day after. And so for most people, that's just like go in and get really good and practice these exercises that we know to be very effective. You're squatting, you're deadlifting, you're rowing, you're pressing, maybe some kind of a split stance exercise like a lunge, some kind of rotation, and just practice them and get good at them. And naturally over time, people will apply more intensity, add more load, and they'll see the results that come from that. But that's a it's a much more effective long-term approach versus the go to the gym, beat myself up attitude.
Right. Yeah. What about, I'm sure you've answered this, 1,000 times, but belly fat seems to be the thing that a lot of people want to eliminate, right? Is there a formula for eliminating belly fat?
Yeah, so...
Or can you do it lots of different ways, or what's the best approach to doing it?
Yeah, so for the most part, where we store or lose body fat is determined by our genetics. So a good rule of thumb is the first place that I store it is probably going to be the last place that I lose it. Now, that being said, hormonal changes can change the distribution of body fat on your body. So if you see like women with very, very high cortisol, estrogen, progesterone imbalances, they'll start to notice more belly fat than they normally would. Men whose, let's say, testosterone is low, estrogen levels may be too high, they'll see more body fat more body fat storage in maybe the upper body, back of the arms, maybe in the lower body. So you'll start to see different patterns, but that's really a small percentage of where we tend to store body fat. It's largely determined by genetics. So the question is, how do I get rid of body fat? Well, it's the same way that you get rid of any body fat. You have to create an energy imbalance, which, to put it simply, and again, it's more complex than this, but to put it simply, you have to be able to burn more calories than you take in. And and we already talked about some of the effective ways to do that. But if you can burn more than you take in, then you'll see body fat loss as a result. Right. And building muscle is a great way to make that formula work for you. Because if you don't, what ends up happening is you cut calories, you do tons and tons of cardio, you cut calories, you lose 15 pounds, you're stuck. Okay, I guess I gotta cut calories more.
And you lose muscle too.
Yeah, well, that's what happens, right? Your body's adapting. So you end up losing some muscle. So now you gotta cut even more to lose that next 10 pounds. And then at the end of it, it's like, okay, I'm eating 1,300 calories a day to maintain this 25-pound weight loss. This is unsustainable. And then you gain it back. So what you wanna do is you wanna say, okay, I definitely wanna eat healthier, but not so little that I can't fuel muscle growth. And I wanna strength train so that I can get my metabolism to learn how to burn more calories on its own. And then the process looks more like a snowball effect rather than this quick weight loss with plateau. So you start to see the scale move a little bit, and then it happens faster and faster and faster. Right. And then you feel better. And I like to communicate this as well, which is, especially to women, muscle is a lot more dense than body fat. So don't get too obsessed with the scale. If I could have everybody watching this lose 10 pounds of body fat and gain 10 pounds of muscle, their weight on the scale wouldn't change, but everybody would be smaller.
And their body composition would look a lot better too.
Oh, you're going to look different, but you're going to be smaller because body fat just takes up more space. Mm-hmm. I used to have this trainer that worked for me. I used to love this. This was a great sales technique when I was a general manager. If I had a new member, especially a woman who was apprehensive to lifting weights, I would invite this trainer that worked for me in, and I'd say, if you could guess her body weight within 10 pounds, I'll give you a free membership for a month.
Wow.
And and she was very petite, so she was like 5'1" or whatever. And they would always guess oh, she's 100 pounds, she's 110 pounds. And I'd get her on the scale and she was 130 pounds. And it would prove my point, she has a lot of muscle, but she's small because muscle is very dense.
What is the main cause in your mind to why it's so hard for people to get rid of that extra 20 or 30 pounds of belly back fat?
Mm-hmm. So when you think about fat burning, there's two different phenomenon at play. One is thermodynamics, so there's more calories in than calories out. And then the other is lipolysis. So if you're going to restructure or recomp a building or your body, you have to remove blocks in some places and then put blocks in other places. So a lot of fat burners help with lipolysis. So they break fat molecules down and they increase, for example, mitochondrial beta oxidation, which is basically just you're metabolizing fats and then using them in the electron transport chain of the mitochondria. The details don't really matter, but that's essentially the powerhouse of your cell. And you can do that all you want, but if you're still, at caloric maintenance or even excess, surplus, then you're just going to take all those blocks and then put them right back into fat cells.
Gotcha. So you need a caloric deficit, it sounds like, somewhere at some point in order to remove. You need to be exercising more than you're consuming, you're burning more calories than you're consuming.
Correct.
Or consuming less than you normally would.
There's many tools and ways to achieve this, of course.
Sure. What ways?
So the OG way is just counting calories.
Right.
And even if you look at doctors and dietitians, we usually underestimate the amount of calories that we consume, I believe by at least 10%.
Wow.
And we overestimate the amount of calories that we burn by about 10%.
We think we're burning more.
Correct.
We're not.
Even doctors and dietitians.
Really?
Yeah.
And we think we're eating less, but there's always hidden calories in something, right? Mm-hmm. Or you maybe didn't weigh it perfectly or it was a bigger size or something, right? Okay, so that's the original ways to count calories. Mm-hmm. Do you recommend that strategy?
For some individuals, it's particularly helpful. Most of the time that I see a patient, and in my clinic, and a lot of what I do is obesity medicine. I am board certified in obesity medicine. They have already done that, and many of the time they say it doesn't work, and I eat like a bird, and there's nothing quite as powerful to destroy a physician-patient relationship than to just tell the patient that they're lying or that they don't know what they're talking about.
Right.
So it's not helpful to push that angle of vector. That's just a tool, and there's many tools in the toolbox. For some people, whether it's genetic or epigenetic or just their situation that they're in life or their mental health or their hormone health, it makes it very difficult for them to lose weight, almost like it's more difficult for someone in quicksand to get out. So you can teach a person how to dig. That's your lifestyle interventions. But you should also give them a shovel to help out.
Right.
It doesn't necessarily mean that you throw a shovel at them.
Sure.
But that's where medications and supplements come in to address whether it's insulin resistance or whether it's their mental health or their hormone health, to help give them the tool to do it themselves.
Okay. So the counting the calories works for some, doesn't work for everyone. What else would you suggest they do then? Or what have you seen has been really effective consistently for people you've worked with?
When I write a prescription for this, I have several different areas or boxes that I can circle. And one of them is number of meals per day. One of them is macronutrients, for example, carbohydrates. One of them is timing of meals. One of them is eating speed. So there's a lot of strategies to develop good eating speed habits. For example, split your meal into 3 different portions. Consume one, wait 10 minutes. Consume the next one if you would like, wait 10 minutes, and then consume the last one if you would like.
So don't just put it all in your mouth in 10 seconds, is what I'm hearing you say, which is kind of my whole childhood. Just like eat it as fast as you can, not know that you're full, and just keep eating more, right?
These are extremely powerful for pediatric patients for childhood obesity. I believe in the New England Journal of Medicine did a study, and it was called the turtle bite study, where every 5 or 10 bites at some interval, the kids took one bite that was extremely slow. And it was helpful for recomposition of those kids.
Really? You mean recomposition of their bodies?
When you're in the field of pediatric obesity medicine, you're not really your end target's not weight loss.
Sure.
It's usually weight gain, but a body recomposition.
So less fat.
Correct.
Weight gain, but more like you're growing as a child either way. But it's diversifying the weight gain, I guess, right?
Correct.
Directing it in another place. Interesting. Okay, so we have meals per day, timing of meals, eating speed. I think you said 1 or 2 others.
Timing of meals, that would kind of incorporate intermittent fasting, which is it's more of a health tool rather than a weight loss tool.
Meals per day, eating speed, timing.
I'm sure there are other tools. Those are the ones that I remember off the top of my head.
If you were just saying, hey, listen, I don't want to count calories, I'm probably not going to do the intermittent fasting thing. I'm not going to eat slower or like split it up in 3 things. That seems like too much work for me. But I will eat 1 less meal a day, right? Or I'll only eat a certain amount of meals, and then I'll essentially be intermittent fasting in that process. But if I looked at it as, okay, what would my meals per day look like? If I wanted to consume a little less calories, obviously I'm going to feel hungry, but when can I do it where I'm not going to want to munch on extra calories? What would that be? Skip dinner? Is that, what does that look like?
I would say skip eating after dinner and don't even worry about taking away a meal. No eating after 7 p.m. That being said, if you do remove 1 meal, whether it's breakfast or lunch or dinner, it is not helpful at all for weight loss or body composition.
To remove 1 meal, it's not helpful.
Correct. So in isolation, removing 1 meal is not helpful at all for weight loss.
Really?
It's truly an intervention for health reasons if you would benefit from that. Less mTOR signaling, less like growth signaling in cells in general, or more of a reprieve where your body's immune system has a chance to go throughout the rest of your cells and see if there is abnormal ones.
Okay.
For most individuals, unless they like doing that for mental clarity or whatever benefit, some people really like skipping breakfast. But many people, especially those that struggle with metabolic syndrome, have other pathologies. There's several new ones. There is sleep eating syndrome, where you eat, you're sleeping, you wake up, and then you eat and you don't even realize it.
Really?
You see that there's a bag of chips and you literally don't even remember it, almost like sleepwalking.
Wow.
And there's also night eating where you consume almost all of your calories between dinner and bedtime. Often these individuals also stay up late at night.
Those are chips, snacks, and other like kind of emptier calories, right?
Correct. But they don't eat breakfast.
Really? Ice cream, cookies, or whatever it might be, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the time where you could really, if you just stop eating after dinner, you'll eat less calories. But that sounds like you're still at kind of like the even maintenance. You're not a caloric deficit, correct? Unless you eat less in each meal.
Correct. And obviously it's possible to be in a deficit and do that as well. But that's your biggest bang for the buck, is not eating anything after dinner. Because society values family dinners and also social dinners with colleagues and whatnot, it would be very difficult to tell everybody to stop eating dinner. But if you wanted to design the perfect, like in a lab, Truman Show style, whatever you want to call it, not eating after about 3 p.m. would be even more beneficial.
For weight loss?
For health reasons.
For health, not weight loss.
I don't think it would have any effect with weight loss. Maybe it would, but that I know of, it has not been studied.
Gotcha. So it's truly because you can still consume all your calories in the morning and in the afternoon before 3 o'clock for the day. You can still consume a lot of calories, is what you're saying. So you'd still have to cut the amount of calories in that timing window. And then you'd just be intermittent fasting longer, right? Which would help for health benefits, and maybe it would, I guess, help cleanse some of the dead cells and kind of like regenerate new cells, that type of thing, but not necessarily for weight loss. Is that what I'm hearing you say? But at the end of the day, it sounds like it's a caloric deficit.
Yeah, and it's just a matter of helping provide individuals with the tools that will work best for them. So for some, they might need a shovel, and for some, they might want and or need a backhoe.
Sure. It doesn't seem like you've ever been out of shape. Have you ever been overweight?
When I had my first child, I was about 40 pounds overweight.
Really?
Yeah, and I could hardly tell because I'm so...
You're tall.
Yeah,
it's hard to see. So it's kind of like the fat just a little bit everywhere, right?
Yeah.
So how did you burn that 40 pounds? What did you do?
I eliminated all liquid calories.
Yeah.
I ate foods of low caloric density, but high nutrient density.
Like what? These 5 types of food groups are... Yeah.
A lot of salmon. I love spinach. I ate a lot of spinach. That would kind of go under the fiber category. Yeah. I love carrots, although carrots don't have a lot of dietary fiber. They're just kind of empty, insoluble fiber, if you will. Not totally, of course.
It's not many calories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a few months later, I was kind of back at my baseline.
Really?
Yep.
40 pounds, just like that in a few months. Just by changing the way you ate.
My biggest intervention was I eliminated all liquid calories, and I did not have any more than 2 caloric beverages, whether it was like a coffee with a bunch of cream in it. I did learn to like black coffee during that time, and I still do, but no more than 2 beverages with calories in them per month.
Interesting, because like something like a bulletproof coffee, which is, a lot of people talk about intermittent fasting with a bulletproof, that still has a lot of calories, doesn't it?
I don't know the macronutrient profile on bulletproof offhand, but I believe it's mostly protein.
Okay.
So the one exception to that for some individuals could be a protein shake. And you would probably want to consume this in the morning rather than the evening. That way you can have the benefit of some degree of appetite suppression. Some protein shakes like casein, which is an interesting one to talk about because it can also affect prolactin. And some people negatively, if their prolactin's too high, casein can increase it. But casein is also digested very slowly, and it has a lot of amino acids in it that will activate mTOR. So during your eating window through the day, if you consume your casein at the beginning of the eating window, then it can be helpful to provide satiety and also help with anabolism. But if you consume it at the end of your day, then it's going to essentially cut short your fasting period.
So if you have a protein shake after 8 o'clock, right? Say someone's working out consistently and they're doing a workout in the morning or in the afternoon, they eat their dinner, but then they're still hungry and they say, well, let me just do a protein shake, right? It's 150, 200 calories, but it's 20 to 40 grams of protein. Are you saying having that, because it's got the calories, it's extending the eating window, so it's not allowing you to burn off those calories more, or what are you saying there?
That would be more for health reasons. For example, let's take an intermittent faster that right before bed every night, they have a shake of 50 grams of casein. So that's essentially making their intermittent fasting for health reasons worthless.
Right.
Because their mTOR is still very active for many hours at night. However, if you are looking at the satiety benefit of specifically protein, if your shake has just protein in it, then that's going to help provide some degree of satiety.
Well, you're not hungry. So you mean, yeah.
Yep. And there's obviously a lot of factors to this. One that has received a lot of press recently is called GLP-1. There's all these different drugs like semaglutide that are GLP-1 agonists. And if you look at carbs, carbs spike up GLP-1 very quickly. GLP-1 is produced in a lot of areas, but a lot of it is the gut and also the pancreas. And then fat will increase very, very slowly, but it will increase GLP-1 for a long time, and protein is somewhere in between.
What was the biggest aha when you learned this thing? It changed everything for you.
You know, there have been so many instances of that. Like, as a scientist, I'm seeing new things literally on a weekly basis. Things are like, my jaw drops virtually. You know, like last week, Lewis, I read about a new discovery that we just discovered a new type of human cell in our heart last week.
Wow.
Like, you know, like that's like I hit my head like, oh my God, really? We a couple years ago, we discovered a new brain cell called the rose hip neuron. Okay. And it seems to be linked to depression. So I'm always amazed. I mean, as a scientist, I'm amazed by the marvelousness of the body and how much we don't know about it. And still, so we have to respect it. Did you know, by the way, that we had it also, this is just this past year, 2021, there was a landmark discovery that changed everything we knew about our metabolism.
What is that?
Well, so everybody says that, you know, like when you're a teenager, you're growing tall.
You got a high metabolism. You're just burning calories.
Right? Yeah. Okay. Totally wrong. Metabolism's going down when you're a teen. Okay. And then people say when you're in your 20s or 30s, you know, and you're starting to gain weight and getting out of shape. And they're like, man, my metabolism is slowing down. And then some people basically say that, you know, I was unlucky because I was born with a bad metabolism. Look at my sister or look at my cousin. She's rail thin. She's so lucky she's got a fast metabolism, right? All that has been upended completely. It turns out that all humans go through only 4 phases of metabolism in their whole life.
Tell me.
Okay. I'm going to show you this because it's actually right here on my desk.
You got a chart. You got a graph. You got a chart.
No, I got a paper. This baby right here. It's in a journal of science. Okay. This is how researchers do it. Like all around my office, man, like I am reading this stuff, and this paper, I tell you, I got to look at this. It studied like 8,000 people from like 30 countries, and it studied people from 8 days old to 90 years old across 20 different countries. All right. This is the largest study of human metabolism ever undertaken. And here's what they found, that if you subtracted out body fat, and which is different for everybody, okay, and you were to just go right down to the core of real metabolism, energy usage, energy generation, here are the 4 phases. When we're born, we got the same metabolism as our mother. Makes sense, synchronized, okay? From 0 or from the day you're born to 1 year old, your metabolism skyrockets. In fact, it's twice high when you're 1 year old as when you're 20 years old.
Wow.
Okay. So from 1 year old down to throughout your teenage years and puberty, at the time you think that you're eating a lot and your metabolism is going sky high, it's actually coming down from its peak.
Interesting. Why does it seem like you're burning so many calories?
Well, you're more active and you're growing.
Yeah.
So you may be burning more calories, but your metabolism isn't changing. This is the key thing. We are hardwired to go through these phases. Now it's going down to 20 years old. From 20 years old to 60 years old. okay, from college to retirement, it doesn't change. It is rock stable.
Huh.
All right. So and then after 60, it starts to diminish, but not as fast as you think. It's a slow grade down. Okay. 4 phases of human metabolism. We never knew this before this year. All right. This is how new it is. So here's the key thing. What makes all the difference between people? Like why is your metabolism different than mine? And why is a sumo wrestler's metabolism different than, somebody who's on a runway in Milan? Okay. And it has to do with the fact that our metabolisms are all the same, but the lifestyle choices that we make can actually push our metabolism one way or the other. So our metabolism doesn't cause us to be fat. Our fat slows down our metabolism. It's the other way around.
Interesting.
Completely the way around.
So how do we burn more fat then to
all right, so
speed up our metabolism?
That's what I'm working on right now, and that is the topic of my next book, by the way, which I'm writing right now. Yeah,
Okay.
So stay tuned for that answer, because I'm onto something really hot on that.
Wow.
And I will give you a little bit of a
sneak peek. What's that early
sneak
finding?
peek.
Yes.
Well, you can eat certain foods to burn your fat down.
Ooh.
So
What?
while caloric restriction and fasting can actually also do it, it turns out there are certain foods that you can actually eat that will trigger it.
Ooh,
You
what
wanna-
are those? Give me some of those.
I don't want to give you a too much. I don't want to give your viewers a spoiler, because I'll have you invite me back on the show. And we'll
Yeah,
talk
we'll have
about
you
that
back.
one
We'll have
next
you back
program.
on for sure. We'll have you back
Yeah.
on for sure. You can give us the whole debrief. But what would you say are a couple of these foods at least that you think that are now researched and proven to be powerful fat burning?
I'll give you one that's actually just a surprise. Is seafood, actually.
Seafood
Yeah.
helps burn fat.
Yep.
Is it help burn fat, or it starts to trigger and activate the fat
Triggers.
burning process?
It triggers. So there are certain elements in food that are newly discovered in research. Like I just told you some new stuff that's coming out of the hot off the presses. But I can tell you, like, this is what I do. The research that, if I told you about research about biotech developments, it may not actually mean anything to you for 10 years, maybe never. Okay. But when there's research about food or about your health, a lot of times there's stuff that has immediacy. You can put it to use right away. So cancer-starving foods, regenerative foods, gut health foods that can also help your brain, foods that slow down cellular aging, foods that lower inflammation and boost your immune system at the same time. That's what I'm talking about, because the power of healing rests inside our body. And healthcare is not something that we need to rely on when we go to the doctor's office, right? Every year you go once. Healthcare is everything in between that we do for ourselves, and food is a medicine that we take.
Absolutely. I've talked about this many times on my show before, that I grew up in a specific religion called Christian Science, where it was more the practice of spiritual awareness, and that were spiritual ideas, and less on using medicine to heal, but more using the mind and awareness to heal, thought, which would then heal the physical body. So medicine was never really a thing I studied or really took growing up. It was just kind of like when we got sick or when something happened, we used thought, prayer, spiritual prayer to kind of remind ourselves of who we are. But I'm curious, do you think that people could live without modern medicine if they eat properly? Like all the things that you talk about in your book, Eat to Beat Disease, do you think we could live longer lives, healthier lives without the need of certain medicines? Or are you saying we should be using medicine and eating food when we need them?
Well, we should be eating to enrich our lives from the time we're young all the way until our last breath. And that should actually be able to tackle about 2/3 of all the chronic diseases. And by the way, about 1/3 of all cancers are thought to be due to diet and lifestyle. 1/3 of cancers. All right. We ought to be able to dodge. but you got to start early, right? I mean, this is not one of these things where I've been smoking my whole life and now I'm going to actually turn over a new leaf. It's never too late to quit, by the way. However, the fact of the matter is that, like, so you grew up, as in the Christian Science framework,
which you're in the Boston area. So
that's where the hub is.
The Mother Church is in Boston. Yes,
it's amazing. It's an amazing place, a really spectacular place to visit, and a very special place actually. But I will tell you that the idea of having formative years groomed in a healthy mindset.
Yes.
Which is, I think, what you're talking about.
Yes.
Is so important, so that if you've got kids and if you're involved with teaching and if you're involved with a business where you can actually impact on kids, think about the impact that you have now could actually influence their health 30, 40, 50, 60 years from now. And that to me is a big responsibility. It's a giant opportunity to make a better society.
That's beautiful. I'm curious, we've got a few more minutes left. What do you think? You're telling me that every week you're essentially finding these aha moments based on the research papers you're finding and things that you're discovering yourself. And what do you think in your mind, if you could predict the future 10 years out, 5-10 years out, what are going to be the groundbreaking things that we as humans discover in the next 5 to 10 years that is going to transform our health?
Wow.
Based on what you've seen in the last 5 to 10 years, and where you're like, these are unbelievable. Every month there's new findings. What do you think is on the horizon for us?
Well, one thing that I think is most, one of the big aha jaw droppers for me in the kind of the journey that I've actually had in my career is the fact that we can regenerate ourselves. Okay. And I never thought that was even possible. I had been working in stem cell therapy and regenerative medicine, and it's a real struggle. It's an uphill climb to really try to show that we can actually regenerate the heart or the brain or nerves. And yet the body does it every single day. And when I discovered that, you could regenerate tissue by barley, eating barley, which is beta-D-glucan, or with chocolate, as I mentioned to you, cacao polyphenols, or even olive oil. There's something called hydroxytyrosol. It's a natural chemical in extra virgin olive oil. It helps to kind of make that distinctive olive oily taste. That can actually help to protect your stem cell. Or if you are not a vegan, but you eat seafood and you're really adventurous, that black pasta squid ink that they have sometimes on menus. I happen to, I like to explore different kinds of food. Squid ink actually protects your stem cells. Wow. It's like a shield. Okay. And so the fact that we can actually eat to regenerate. So I'm very excited by this idea that we can eat foods, and we're still discovering what foods can help propel our body's regenerative capacity. I think that's going to actually be groundbreaking. And then something that I'm actually working on that is really, future forward, right? So you're asking like, what's going to be mind blowing in the future?
Yes.
All right. Well, look, I'm kind of like a pretty down to earth guy. Like I believe that we should be protecting our planet, doing everything we can to take care of, nurture this ball that we live on, and we should be doing better for our community. But I think from the time I was a kid, I appreciated and I was excited by this idea of space travel, which is now happening more often, right? All right. So here's something I think is going to happen over the next decade. As humans become extraterrestrial, we're going to be the first extraterrestrials we're ever going to meet is ourselves. And we get beyond near Earth orbit, our bodies are going to be bombarded by galactic radiation and have the effects of negative gravity changing our body. We got to find out what kinds of foods or supplements that we got to eat to protect ourselves.
That's crazy.
So I'm working on that.
That's cool.
So I've been meeting with astronauts. I've been talking to people in the space program, flight surgeons. And what I'm figuring is that if we can figure out what we're going to need in the future, to that, we could probably bring that right down to earth right now.
You had like a formula in there that you said about 2 minutes ago. You said no snacking. You said a few other things. Can you share that formula again?
Yeah. So one, you want to cut down the sugar because sugar is not good. And I think everybody agrees on that, right? Cut down the refined foods. So this actually applies mostly to carbohydrates, but refined other stuff is not good either. So refined fats, for example, are not good for you. So trans fats were pretty clearly bad. Refined meat, like bologna and hot dogs and stuff, are not really good for you either. So you want to eat whole foods, right? So whole foods, you want to eat no sugar, you want to eat, plenty of proteins and fats. And then you want to make sure you have cut out the snacks and have a decent period of fasting. And that really just gets you back to 1970, where people were still eating white bread, right? White bread. I know I grew up in that period. Nobody ate whole wheat bread. Nobody ate whole wheat pasta. It was white bread, it was white pasta, right? But you didn't eat all the time. That was the big difference, right? And it was the same everywhere you went. And the Irish were eating potatoes, the Chinese were eating rice, the Japanese were eating rice, Those are all carbs, refined carbs, right? Bread, rice, potatoes. But they were doing okay because they weren't eating all the time. They'd give their bodies a break from eating, right? Whereas now we don't give our bodies a break from eating. We think that it's healthy to constantly eat. We've lost the idea that there's that balance between eating and not eating. Like, why wouldn't you think that that's important?
Right.
Balance everything else in life, right? Why wouldn't you want to balance eating and not eating, right? Don't you think that's like fundamentally important? Like, I think it is, but up until I wrote the obesity code, people just thought fasting was really bad for you, which is sort of odd, because it's like, up until then, everybody's saying, oh, fasting's so bad for you, right? You're going to do so bad. It's like, we've been doing it for a long time, right?
So I'm curious then, what effect does fasting have on reducing our chances of getting life-threatening diseases? And also, which diseases are most people at risk if they don't fast and improve their diet?
Type 2 diabetes is probably the biggest one. And the reason is that it's a huge one. It's become an epidemic. So lots of people have it. If you look at pre-diabetes and diabetes, which is and you do big surveys, it's actually about 50% of adult Americans, right? So it's very common to have pre-diabetes and diabetes. And the problem with it is that it causes all kinds of other problems. It increases your risk of heart attacks, strokes, cancer. It's leading cause of blindness, leading cause of non-traumatic amputations, leading cause of kidney disease, all of those things. And, in trying to understand type 2 diabetes, you just have to understand that it's basically your body has too much sugar. That's it. So if you have too much sugar, remember, your body really has two sources of energy it can use. It can use sugar, which is mostly glucose, and it can use fat. And when your body stores energy, it stores it as sugar or it stores it as fat. Makes sense, right? So if you have too much fat, then you have obesity. If you have too much sugar, you have type 2 diabetes.
Interesting.
But the solution is the same. So think about it. Your body has too much energy, both situations. Obesity, you have too much energy stored away. In type 2 diabetes, you have too much sugar, which is also too much energy stored away, because both fat and sugar are sources of energy for the body. So if you think about trying to reverse type 2 diabetes, because again, I wrote about this in the diabetes code, and I said it's a reversible disease because your body doesn't have too little energy. It has too much energy. So think about this situation. Think about your car. Suppose you go to the gas station 3 times a day, you fill up. Now it's full, but you still keep pumping gas in, right? So it's spilling out, it's spilling into your back seat, and it's now making you sick. But what are you going to do? Well, here's what you wouldn't do, is keep going to that gas station 3 times a day, right? It's ridiculous. You do 2 things. 1, stop putting gas in. And 2, drive that car around so that you use the gas that's there. That's what you would do. Now think about
Burn
your
the,
body.
burn the gas. Burn the
Burn the
gas.
gas, exactly. Think about your body. Your body has too much energy. What are you going to do? 1, stop putting it in. 2, let it run without putting it in for a while. That's intermittent fasting. That's all you have to do. And think about this situation. You've got a disease state which has become an epidemic, which contributes to heart attacks, strokes, cancer. But you have a solution which is completely free and has been used for thousands of years, which is not anything more complicated than let your body run off of the fuel that's already sitting on there.
Mm-hmm.
Is it fun? No, it's not fun. Is it healthy? Yes, it is. In those situations, very healthy. And people used to say, well, people won't do it. It's like, my job as a doctor is not to tell people what they will and won't do. My job is to tell them how they should get healthy, and I'll help them, right? So if fasting is a good solution, which I believe it is, then I'll help them. Whether they do it or not is up to them, right? But the point is that it's free, it's simple, it's been used for thousands of years, it's available to everybody. You don't need special equipment, you don't need a special diet, you don't need a special anything. Everybody in the world can do this at any time, like literally like today, tomorrow, anytime they could do it. It's not like, oh, I have this great drug for people. Yeah, but except it costs $500,000, right? That's crazy. No, fasting's not doing do that. You're going to save time, you're going to save money, and you're going to get healthier. So what could be better than that? Like, it's a crazy situation where we have this huge healthcare issue, but the solution is completely free, which explains why there's so few people telling you to do it, because who's going to make money on it, right? And that's not my concern. My concern is telling people what they need to do to get healthy, right?
Yeah. What do you think is the biggest mistake people make when it comes to fasting then?
I think the single biggest mistake is sort of overeating afterwards. So you fast for a period of time, then you say, oh, well, I deserve that ice cream. It's like, you could do it, but you're going to sort of get a lot less benefit. You're going like, you got a great benefit from the fasting. Now, you're losing some of that because you're eating the foods that you didn't eat. And that really is a temptation for people to do. And I think it's natural, and we've all done it. And, but the point is that after you fast, you should really just eat as normally as possible. So if you eat, a normal breakfast, normal lunch, normal dinner, the next day is your fasting day. You don't eat breakfast, you don't eat lunch. You should eat a normal dinner. Don't try to eat all 3 meals crammed into one, right? That's not the point. Like, the point is to drop those meals and let your body take the energy from your body fat. So you drop breakfast, your body normally gets 500 calories from there. You want to take it out of your body fat. Same thing for lunch. If at dinner, instead of taking 1,000 calories, you decide to stick in 2,000 calories, well, you've negated a lot of the benefits that you should have gotten, because that energy is going to go in, right? So the good thing is that it's hard to do that. So when you restrict the time and you don't tell people what to eat or how much to eat, they actually naturally eat less. So it's actually an interesting thing, because this gets to the question of hunger. So there's, in terms of weight loss, there's sort of 2 big issues that trip people up. One is metabolic rate, and 2 is hunger. So hunger, people think that hunger will just go up like this with fasting. It's actually not true. So you can actually measure the hunger hormone called ghrelin, which is basically, it goes up high and you get hungry. So when you fast, ghrelin is high. So if you normally eat lunch, you're hungry. So ghrelin is high. What happens when you don't eat lunch? You skip your lunch. Well, a couple hours later, your ghrelin level actually falls back to baseline. So in fact,
you don't feel hungry anymore.
No, your hunger goes back to baseline level.
Interesting.
So if you eat lunch at 12, you're hungry at 12. Now you skip lunch, you're hungry at 12, you're hungry at 1. By 4, it's no different than if you ate or didn't eat. So people are like, what happened? Well, your body took the energy from your body fat stores. You took the 500 calories from body fat. You basically fed yourself off of that body fat. So why would you be hungry? The answer is you're not. And that's why it goes right back to baseline. Same thing happens at dinner. If you do multiple day fasts, it's actually even more interesting because ghrelin actually, after day 1 to 2, it actually starts to go down and down and down. So your hunger actually disappears by like day 3, day 4. People just aren't hungry anymore because they're fueling themselves on the body fat. And I think it was actually a sort of protective mechanism, because if there was a prolonged period where you weren't eating, I think the body evolved so that you wouldn't be constantly distracted. So people on these long fasts do very well because they've gone into the stage of fat burning because they're fueling themselves purely on the fat, and their hunger is gone. So they're actually feeling pretty good, and they're losing weight.
They feel clear, they feel productive, they have more energy.
Yeah.
There comes a point where I feel like I did a 3-day fast. I think maybe I did 3.5 days. And I remember thinking, okay, I'm kind of feeling a little bit tired. Like I could use some food now.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just because I haven't, pushed it beyond that before. So it's just every day I have to learn how to manage it. But
it takes a bit of getting used to, because most of us are not used to it. And that's probably the biggest obstacle, because we're in a culture where the norm is not sort of 14 hours of fasting. The norm is like eat until you go to sleep and eat as soon as you wake up, right? And that was one of those big destructive myths, which was that breakfast is the most important meal of the day, which is fine. If you like breakfast, it's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But the problem was when people took that to mean that if you weren't hungry in the morning and you didn't really like breakfast because you weren't a breakfast person, you should still eat like Fruit Loops, right? Because you had breakfast. And like, okay, now that's not the point. Eating sugar and, refined carbs is not a good strategy. You're better off not eating.
Let's say that you were able to give a 5-step process for someone who's 30 pounds of belly fat, or around there, 20 to 30 pounds of belly fat. And they were like, you know what? For once in my life, I want to get like at least a flat stomach.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not going to be super defined and under 8% body fat, but 12% body fat, roughly 10%, and I could get close.
Sure.
But everything we talked about, from sleep to emotional stress to nutrition to, we haven't talked about calories in, calories out, or lifting and things like that yet, but from other things we talked about, if you had to give a 5, bullet point process of like, this would be the foundational steps to get you started on losing that 30 pounds of belly fat, what would you say?
Yeah, I'd say, and I've talked about this before, step 1, very clear and defined breaks between meals, whether you are snacking or not. What I mean by that is, rather than grazing throughout the day and constantly keeping insulin levels high, I find people have much more success by having very clear, defined gaps. So I don't care if you're fasting or not, but eat breakfast and have a very clear and defined break until lunch. Have a very clear and defined break until dinner. Allow yourself the ability for insulin levels to come back down, glucagon levels to come up, so that you're actually getting into a fat burning process between these meals. Every time you're consuming something, you're kind of stopping that process for a little bit.
Interesting.
Right? Even if your calories are, yes, that comes into equation, but you need to have these peaks and valleys a little
Breaks between consumption.
Yes.
Now, can you consume water, teas,
Yes.
coffees, anything
For sure.
else?
Anything 0 calorie. I mean, it's,
0 calorie.
yeah, I think once people will naturally eat less doing that too. But I do think that we have to take little bits from the calories equation and little bits from carb insulin model and meld them together instead of having these two camps that are largely opposed. And that's where I say, hey, this seems like an equal, delicate, thoughtful acknowledgement of both sides. You're probably going to eat less by having these clear defined meals, but you're also taking into account letting insulin levels come back down nice and low, and you're not keeping them chronically elevated, which we know is not good either.
Yeah.
So that's usually rule number 1.
Okay, step 1. Yep.
Step number 2 is very similar, but I say have a minimum 12-hour break between your last meal of the day and your first meal of the day.
So 12-hour fasting minimum.
And it's not really a fast, right?
Like sleep and don't eat after 8.
Exactly. Yeah. I feel like there's a reason why you get your blood work done after a 12-hour fast, right? Things tend to come back down to homeostasis. Give yourself a chance to get back down to this balance. There's a multitude of different reasons why that's beneficial. Insulin levels getting lower, insulin sensitivity getting much better, so the food that you do eat with breakfast is going to be much more, able to be taken up and utilized, which leads into step 3, breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince, dinner like a pauper, right? So you're kind of tapering as the day goes on. So larger meals in the morning, if you're not fasting, which we'll talk about here later, if you're not fasting, having a larger meal in the morning is generally going to be better. And if you look at the research, it's very, very clear that people that have a larger breakfast end up eating smaller lunches and smaller dinners naturally.
Because they feel satiated, right?
And that doesn't mean that you go eat a box of Fruit Loops or Cheerios for breakfast, right? And with that, I'll kind of dovetail into a slightly different piece that kind of coincides with that. Okay, there was a BMC medical genomics study that's probably one of my favorite studies that demonstrated that you can have higher fat content in the morning because you end up starting the day with more insulin sensitive muscles and less insulin sensitive fat cells. What that means is you have less likelihood of storing fat as fat in the morning. And that way you start your day with higher fat, higher calorically dense meals. So maybe steak and eggs, something like that, without a bunch of hyperpalatable carbs, right?
Yes.
Something that's calorically dense. And then as the day goes on, taper calories. Carbohydrates are lower calorie than fats, even though they do spike your glucose and spike your insulin. It's okay to have those at night if you're not overdoing it. So a lot of times what I will do is I will have a higher fat breakfast. I will have something like steak and eggs for breakfast, or usually like steak and like ground beef. I'm a big fan of like that Joe's scramble kind of thing that you
so
do,
good,
right?
man.
With like a little bit of goat cheese, a little bit of feta, maybe some like lox, make it very Mediterranean. And that's pretty high fat, so it's calorically dense, right? It ends up being like 800 calories, right? Then as the day goes on, like a slightly smaller lunch, and if I am having carbohydrates, they're usually allocated to the evening time. That doesn't mean I'm having cakes and pies. It means maybe I'll have some lentils, maybe I'll have some, something Mediterranean, right? Then, that's going to naturally be lower calorie because there's not as many fats in it, right? So your day's just kind of going like this.
Before the interview continues, if you feel like you're not living your most authentic life, not leaning into your purpose, and not living the life that your future self would be extremely proud of, I've written a new book called The Greatness Mindset, and I think you're gonna love this. Through powerful stories, science-backed strategies, and step-by-step guidance, The Greatness Mindset will help you overcome all the different challenges in your life to design the life of your dreams and then turn it into your reality. Make sure to click the link below in the description to get your copy today. Okay, let's get back to this video. What's the breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince,
Dinner like a pauper.
like a pauper? Gotcha.
Yep. So and that's just age-old wisdom, right? It's
you
like
go.
that's like
Small dinner,
I remember
yeah.
my, I'm largely like Mediterranean. I'm mostly Italian, so it's like I look back at that and like my grandmother was always kind of saying like she always had these light dinners, these little teeny dinners, right? It was just like, and you look at a lot of the Mediterranean cultures, and with the exception of when they're having big feasts and stuff for special events, like a lot of times they are having really small dinners, right? And they're like shutting it down right after dinner. It's like maybe they'll have a little bit of coffee or whatever it is they're having, and then go right to sleep.
Yeah.
And then when you go into step 4 is your diet should optimize your sleep. Right, that's something that we kind of talked about in the beginning, but the best way that you can optimize your sleep without really digging super deep into what is stressing you out and causing this sort of internal battles that might be keeping you up, cutting your food out a few hours before bed is usually very, very powerful for people. And that, again, it nicely coincides with everything I'm talking about. Again, if you're having those 12-hour breaks between dinner and breakfast, well, then the earlier you eat your dinner and shut it down, the earlier you can eat breakfast the next day, right? If you stop eating dinner at 6 p.m., you're done eating, then by 6 a.m., you're good to eat again. And chances are you're not going to roll out of bed at 5:59 and immediately go eat at 6.
No.
You're probably going to naturally end up fasting longer.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be a quote-unquote intermittent faster. You're naturally kind of, getting into that category, right?
Okay. And number 5?
And number 5, and this is something that you pull the throttle on or hit the throttle on occasionally, right? You want to temporarily, like when it's time to really pull that lever, temporarily reduce fats and then bring them back up, right? So that's sort of my lever, right? If I'm following all 4 of these lifestyle principles and things are working but not working as fast as I want, what I will temporarily do is reduce fats out of the diet, even if I'm low carb. Okay, this sounds crazy, right? But then bring them back in once weight has started to come off. people forget that even if you're doing, and I'm largely a low carb guy, so I catch heat for saying this sometimes, but fats are still calorically dense. So it's the easiest lever to pull from a food volume standpoint to dramatically reduce calories really quick, and then be able to bring them back. Because what you don't want to do is you don't want to have just this point where you're chronically restricting calories forever and ever and ever, and then the moment that you do come back up, your body's like, oh shoot, put the weight back on.
Yeah, it's not fun.
I actually think, and there's recent research to back this up, that keeping calories moderately high and then having aggressive short-term drops, like reducing fats and bringing calories low for a couple of days and then back up, can actually be very, very effective, which is probably why fasting works so well for a lot of people that just do it at random.
Yeah.
Like they'll just be like, I'm eating 6 days per week normal, and then I do a 24-hour fast once per week. It's great because you're never letting your body get accustomed to this decline in calories. You're just like status quo, whoa, what's going on? And then back up to normal.
Who do you recommend fasting for, and who do you not recommend it for?
I don't think there's many people that shouldn't do fasting to a certain degree, right? But there's a large degree of different kinds of fasting.
There's 24-hour fasting, there's 16.
Exactly. And like a 16-hour fast, if you want to put the label on it, you can call yourself intermittent fasting, but there's a lot of people out there that are probably intermittent fasting that don't know they're intermittent fasting, right? So 16 hours is pretty, I think the benefits start at 16 hours. So someone doing a 16-8 fasting, that usually works, but the reason that that's working is for two simple reasons: caloric restriction and insulin being lower. Nothing magical is happening with a 16-hour fast, but when you start creeping over that 16-hour mark is when the benefits start to kick in. So like I personally, I fast usually 3 days per week with like a 20 or 21-hour fast. So I'm still eating like 2 meals, and I just do it 3 days per week, so it's kind of intermittent. I can't think of a lot of people that wouldn't have success doing that, because almost everyone that even thinks they wouldn't be able to do it, they might get hungry the first couple of times, and then after that, it's a cakewalk. It's not. Now, people that have serious hypoglycemia issues, they should probably be conscious of it. Mm-hmm. That being said, and full disclaimer, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a dietitian, but even people that are dealing with hypoglycemia, a lot of times getting their bodies adjusted to periods of time without food is actually a good thing, because it teaches their body to be able to utilize alternative fuel sources, so they're not reliant on this undulation in glucose.
Right.
There's certain people that, if you're very, 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 very active, then yeah, it might not work for you. Like someone that's working crazy manual labor construction. I'm sure there's different situations, clinical conditions that people shouldn't fast. And those, defer to your doctor. But as far as general people, I can't really think of anyone that wouldn't get some benefit out of it, even if it's just mental.
This is how they sell their products. They sell you food with excitement and, beer commercials, and they show you the girls and the beach and, eat this. Look, we crave popcorn when we go to the movies. They've already created that association. We probably already have foods that we have emotional connections to.